Think about the last time something went wrong, not catastrophically, just enough to ruin your mood for the rest of the day. Someone canceled on you. A comment stung more than it should have. A plan fell apart. And for hours afterward, maybe longer, your mind kept circling back to it, replaying it, letting it quietly control everything else you did that day. Most people assume that's just how life works. Something happens, you react, the reaction runs its course. But there's a specific mindset shift that changes this entire pattern, and once you actually understand it, you start noticing how much of your life has been shaped by things that were never actually in your control to begin with. Here's what most people never realize. It's not the event itself that determines how your day goes. It's the meaning you immediately assign to it so quickly that it feels automatic, almost involuntary. Someone cancels plans, and within seconds your mind has already decided what that means. Maybe it means you're not a priority. Maybe it means something's wrong with the friendship. That meaning, not the cancellation itself, is what actually produces the frustration, the hurt, the spiral. This connects to something well established in psychology called cognitive appraisal. The idea that emotional reactions come not directly from events, but from the interpretation layered on top of them almost instantly. Two people can experience the exact same situation and walk away with completely different emotional responses, purely based on the story each of them told themselves about what it meant. And it gets even more interesting than that, because this interpretation process happens so fast that most people mistake it for reality itself. You don't experience the event and then separately experience your judgment of it. They arrive together, fused, which is exactly why it feels like the situation itself caused the emotion, rather than your reaction to it. This is where almost everyone gets stuck, because you can't change what you don't realize is happening. The mindset shift begins with a single, uncomfortable recognition. The event and your suffering over the event are two separate things, and only one of them is actually happening to you. The other one you're doing to yourself, often without noticing. This isn't about pretending difficult things don't hurt, or forcing positivity onto situations that are genuinely painful. It's something closer to what's described in Stoic philosophy as the space between stimulus and response, a space most people never realize exists, because their reactions feel instantaneous and automatic. But that space is there. It's just been unused for so long that it feels like it isn't. Understanding this shift changes behavior through three specific mechanisms. The first is separating facts from interpretation, in real time. When something happens, there's usually a small, verifiable fact buried underneath a much larger emotional story. Someone canceled plans, that's the fact. Everything else, they don't value me, this always happens, I can't rely on anyone, is interpretation layered on top, built from past experiences, insecurities, and assumptions that may have nothing to do with this specific moment. The people who master this shift train themselves to notice the exact point where fact ends and story begins. It's a small pause, almost invisible to anyone watching, but it changes everything about what happens next. The second is recognizing that most emotional reactions are about pattern, not present moment. This connects to something called emotional regulation. But on a deeper level, it's about noticing how much of your reaction to a current event is actually being borrowed from something older. A canceled plan doesn't usually hurt because of the plan itself. It hurts because it echoes an old fear, being unimportant, being replaceable, being left. Once you can identify that echo, the present situation stops carrying the full emotional weight of your entire history and starts being seen for what it actually is: small, temporary, survivable. The third, and the one that requires the most practice, is choosing a response instead of defaulting to one. Most people believe their reactions are fixed, that frustration, anger, or hurt simply happen to them. But every reaction is, underneath the automatic feeling of it, a choice being made extremely quickly, based on habit. This taps into cognitive load, the idea that your brain, under stress, defaults to the fastest available response rather than the most accurate one. Slowing down, even by a few seconds, interrupts that default pathway and allows something closer to intention to take over instead of reflex. There's a reason this shift feels so difficult at first, even once you understand it intellectually. Your mind has spent years building automatic pathways between certain triggers and certain reactions, and pathways used often become easier to access than new ones. This isn't a character flaw. It's simply how the brain conserves energy, which means the goal was never to eliminate the automatic reaction entirely. It's to notice it a little sooner each time, until eventually there's enough space to choose something different before the old pattern takes over completely. This is ultimately what separates people who feel controlled by their circumstances from people who feel like they're moving through life with some sense of steadiness, regardless of what happens around them. It was never about experiencing fewer difficult moments. Everyone experiences those. It's about no longer handing every one of those moments the power to decide how the rest of the day, or the rest of a relationship, or the rest of a decision unfolds. The event will always be outside your control. That was never going to change. But the meaning attached to it, the story built on top of it in those first few seconds, that part was always yours. Most people just never realized they were allowed to look at it twice before believing it. True power is rarely about controlling other people. It's about controlling yourself. If you want to keep exploring the psychology behind emotional control, mindset, and self-respect, consider subscribing. There's a lot more beneath the surface of how your mind decides what things mean, and most of it is far more within your control than it feels.